Alright folks, today I want to share with you a very special book. This is The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Steven Covey. And I'm going to go out on a limb here and say that this is the best personal development book, certainly that I've ever read, and perhaps the best personal development book in the industry. Huge claim, there's a lot of contenders, but for me, this book just has so much depth, so much applicable knowledge, and so much reread value that I think that this book shoots to the top of the list. I first read this a couple years ago when I was first starting out on my personal development journey and seeking to become a thought leader. And since then, I've reread this book a further 2 times. So I've read this 3 times in total. And on that 3rd time, I was still taking a ton of notes and really gaining a new perception and a new conception of what these 7 habits are all about, whether I was doing them, how I could apply them into my life and into my work. So if you want to improve your productivity, if you want to build your character, if you want to develop your relationships, if you want to connect with your spirituality, all of this is contained in this book. It really is a phenomenal piece of work. And to anyone who's starting out in the industry and is asking what resources to look at, what books to read, I always suggest this one. It's got a very simple, clear, concise manner, but with some hugely applicable and transformational information contained in here. So what I'm going to do is, in this video, I'm going to run through all of the 7 habits, what they are, and kind of my personal perception of them. For those of you who haven't read the book before, this will give you a nice little overview of what the book's all about. And indeed, for those of you who have read the book before, I think the wonderful thing about any book, and this book is no different, is the author writes the book in a singular way, but there are multiple interpretations of those same words. So what I think is really useful and really powerful is to share these perceptions, share what we took from the book. The way that I apply the habits and use them might be different to how someone else applies the habits and use them. And we can both learn from each other through the way that we saw the book and what we've picked up. So even if you've read the book before, I'd also recommend staying on this video and having a listen. And hopefully there's some things that I share from my taking of the book that really opens up and broadens your understanding of what the 7 habits are all about. So this book is split into 2. We can split the 7 habits down the middle. The first 3 habits are habits of personal effectiveness. The second 3 habits are habits of interpersonal effectiveness. And then the 7th habit is a rounding habit that brings all of them together. So we're going to run through the habits in order, starting with the habits of personal effectiveness. And of these, habit number 1 is be proactive. What does this mean? It means that if you want something in life, if you want to do something, if you want to be someone, you've got to take that into your own hands. In the book, Steven shares the story of Viktor Frankl, who wrote Man's Search for Meaning, which is another amazing book. Would highly recommend that you read that one as well. And Viktor was a Jewish psychiatrist who was a prisoner in Nazi war camps. And during his time in the camps, Viktor realized the elements of the human condition that no one can take away from you. Despite all of the atrocities and injustice and terrible suffering that the Nazis put their prisoners through, Viktor discovered that in these camps, in what is arguably the lowest point of human suffering and human hatred that we've ever had in our world and in our history, Viktor found that there were some rays of light. There were some parts of the human condition that endured and had lived on. And one of Viktor Frankl's key takeaways from his experience was, between stimulus and response, man has the freedom to choose. What Victor realized that in these camps is we can't always choose what happens to us, but we can choose our attitude to what happens to us. We can choose how to perceive things. And this isn't saying that he thought that his time in the camps was lovely and joyful and wonderful, of course not. But what he realized was, I can choose what I want to focus on. I can focus on the pain and suffering, or I can try and find something else in my environment, something else in my head, a hope in the future that I can focus on and put my energy and attention there rather than on what is happening to me at this moment in time. And that is a huge element of proactiveness. It's recognizing that you have the freedom to choose. So no matter what your life circumstances, no matter what your financial situation is, no matter how skilled or confident you think you are, you can set yourself on the path to where you want to go. If you want something in life, then you've got to take charge and you've got to start doing that yourself. You can't wait around for things to fall into your lap. You can't wait around for the perfect opportunity, because there is no perfect opportunity. If you want something in life, you've got to go out there and make it happen. And that is what effective people do. So they embrace habit number 1. They are proactive. So, moving on to habit number 2. Habit 2 is begin with the end in mind. So, with proactivity, we don't want to run forth like a headless chicken. We want to think about where we're going. We want to have a clear idea and vision of what we want the end result to be. And in this, Steven Covey outlines a very powerful visualization that really hit me at this particular time in my life that I first read it. When I first read this book, it was about 2 or 3 months after my dad had passed away. And what this visualization entails is going to a funeral. And as you go into the funeral, you look into the casket of the funeral and you realize that it's you lying in the casket. And what this visualization asks you to do is you imagine these 4 people who are speaking at your funeral. It's someone in your family, it's a close friend, it's a colleague at work, and it's someone that you impacted in a wider circumstance in life, in a community that you were a part of, or a group that you ran. And the visualization asks you to imagine what you'd want these 4 people to say at your funeral. How would you want them to describe who you were as a person and what you did in your life? And this really impacted me because it wasn't that long ago that I had been at a funeral, and it really reinforced my mortality motivation of recognizing that we've only got this one chance in our lives, and we've got to make the best of this particular shot. And if we're going to make the best of this particular shot, we need to work out, what do we want to have, what do we want to have done, and what do we want to be at the end of our lives? And this is what beginning with the end in mind is all about. It's working out, well, what is your ultimate goal? Who is the ultimate version of you, and what is the ultimate expression of your mission in life? And from there, you then have a homing beacon, you have a northern star, which guides all of your other actions in life. And this is what highly effective people do, is they have a clear vision and intention of where they're going, and everything that they do in their life is engineered and geared around that outcome. So now we've got the vision of where we want to go, we're chasing it proactively, but what habit number 3 allows us to do is to really chase this with some strategy, and this is all about the productivity and the time management section of the book. Habit number 3 is put first things first. To identify what is really important for us to be doing and to do it on a consistent basis. And it's here that Steven Covey outlines possibly his most famous diagram. It is the time management quadrant. And what this quadrant is all about is it recognizes that we have 2 different types of tasks. Tasks based on urgency and tasks based on importance. And what you find is that all of the things that we do in our lives can be categorized on these 2 variables. So things that are urgent are things that are demanding our attention right now. It's a ringing phone, it's a message popping up on our notifications, it's a fire alarm going off. It's things that demand a response here and now. Things that are important are things that are going to move us forward. They're going to drive growth, they're going to drive change, but they don't necessarily require action to be taken here, right now, in this moment. And what you'll find is that a lot of us are spending time on tasks that are urgent, things that are constantly demanding our attention. We're in a very highly connected, highly stressful world where so many things are pinging at us, demanding a response. Some of these things are important to deal with. This is quadrant 1. Some of these things need our attention right now, and it's important that we do it. If that fire alarm goes off, then that is demanding a response right now, and it's important for our safety and for our lives that we get out of the building. That's an example of a quadrant 1 task. However, what we often get caught up in is a quadrant 3 task. This is something that is urgent, but isn't really that important. And this is where so much of our days and our lives get sucked into, is the notifications that ping up, the emails, the phone calls. Watch this, buy this, read this, answer this, tell me this. And all these things have this sense of false urgency, like they need a response, like they're important to address right now, and our brain gets tricked and wired into thinking that this is the case. But actually, in the grand scheme of things, are they really important? Is it important to read this, watch this, buy this, answer that, tell me this? Is that really moving us ahead in our lives? Is the world going to end if we don't do these things? In the vast majority of cases, the answer to those questions is no. So why do we spend so much time in here? It's this sense of urgency. Urgency confuses us and makes us think that something is important. Sometimes something is urgent and important, like that fire alarm going off, but an email pinging through on your phone, yes, it has that sense of urgency, but it lacks that sense of importance. So what we find is our time often gets sucked away into quadrant 3, and we don't spend enough time in quadrant 2. Quadrant 2 is activities that aren't urgent, but they are important. This is your meditation, this is your exercise, this is your reading, this is all of your personal development activities in general. These are things that don't have that sense of urgency. You know, you're not going to die if you don't meditate. The world isn't going to end if you don't exercise that day. But these things are important. They're important for your health, they're important for your career, they're important for your relationships. But we're getting our time sucked away from doing these activities into these things that are urgent. So what we need to do in order to be more effective in our lives is to take away the time spent on things that are urgent and start dedicating them more into things that are important. The quadrant 2 tasks are the tasks that are going to drive you forward, they're going to move you ahead, they're going to help you change, adapt and grow into that vision you have of yourself, into that vision you created from habit 2, begin with the end in mind. You see, what often happens is we spend so much time in our urgent tasks and we're rushed off our feet and we're anxious and we're stressed that we lose energy and motivation to do these important things. So from here, we too often slip down into quadrant 4. These are tasks that aren't urgent and they're not important. And this is where we waste our time in life. This is binge watching things on Netflix. This is scrolling endlessly down the Facebook feed. This is watching endless cat videos on YouTube. It's stuff that isn't really urgent, it's not really important. It's this passive, mindless hedonism that we use as a coping response to spending too much time in a sense of urgency. So in order to be highly effective, we need to reduce the time that we spend in these 3 quadrants, in the urgent and important tasks, the urgent and not important tasks, and the non-urgent and non-important tasks, and spend more time here in quadrant 2 on things that are really important and are going to move us forward in our lives. And so that are the habits of personal effectiveness. Be proactive, begin with the end in mind, and put first things first. And that's just the first half of the book. If you just read that alone, you would be able to grow, learn, and develop so much in your life. But there are another 3 set of habits to come. And these habits are the interpersonal habits. And this is how you really grow from being just beyond yourself and just being highly effective for yourself, contained within, and how you really bring that out into the world and express it fully in your relationships, in your service, and your contribution. And all this begins with habit number 4. And this is think, win, win. And what this means is that in any situation, in any crisis, in any difference of perspective or conflict, we can find a solution that has a win in it for everyone. Because what we're so often scripted with in our society nowadays is a win-lose mentality. We see all around us and we thus believe that for anything to happen, for any win to happen, there must be someone along the way who's losing. If we look at sports, one team wins and another team loses. If we look at education, some children get an A grade and other children get a C grade. If we look at just where we generally live, where you were born, your postcode can dictate so much of the opportunities that you have. One postcode hoards all the opportunities and all the abundance, and another postcode has none of the opportunities and none of the abundance. And so we are brought up on this script, and it's actually a false script. Because if we really try hard enough and strive long enough, we can find win-win solutions. We can find solutions that work for everyone and ultimately make everyone happy and make the world a far better place to be in. And learning how to think win-win has been particularly huge for me in my personal relationships, in my romantic relationships. Because instead of seeking compromise, I seek win-win. Now, compromise isn't a win-win, because generally what happens with a compromise is that both parties kind of feel a bit miffed because they had to give something up and make a sacrifice for the sake of the compromise. Win-win isn't a compromise. Win-win is a level above a compromise. As both parties come together, and rather than each making sacrifices for a compromise, they each bring gains to make a win-win. And so looking at my personal relationships, it's really affected me romantically in particular, but also in my friendships and my business partnerships, is really looking at, if one of us is winning in the scenario, how can we transfer that over to the other side? If something's going well for me, how can I bleed some of that over to the other person? If something's going well for their side of things, how can I take that and apply that into my life to also create a win on my side of the equation? So thinking win-win is powerful, because ultimately it makes all of your interactions a whole lot happier, because rather than coming from this place of sacrifice and this place of scarcity, you come from this place of collaboration and this place of abundance. So to begin our interpersonal effectiveness journey, we start with this mentality. Think win-win. See relationships as this opportunity to come together and create something bigger. And we'll talk about that a little bit later. But what I want to talk about next is habit number 5, which is seek first to understand and then to be understood. And this habit is huge. If I could recommend anything for relationships, a particular skill and a particular shift, this habit number 5 would be that. Because what this habit is all about listening, it's all about understanding, it's all about empathy. And these are skills that I think are hugely lacking in our relationships nowadays. Because what so often happens in the way we conduct our relationships these days is it's all about us. We put across ourselves first. It's our stories, our problems, our perception of the world. And we don't take that time to really see the world through other people's eyes, to listen to them, to learn about them, to understand them. And habit number 5 changes all that. It outlines some powerful frameworks that you can use to really learn how to get into the world of other people. And what you'll find is that if you're able to do this in your life, you have a huge capacity to be able to inform, influence, and inspire others. So when you really understand what makes a person tick and the way that they see the world, then this allows you to communicate directly to them at a deep level. A level where they feel that they're really connected with you and you really understand who they are. And that's what the habit is all about. It's all about understanding people first. And when you give people that kind of treatment and that kind of power and that kind of connection, they will respond to that in a big way. And you'll find that the more that you understand others, the more they will also understand you. And that brings us onto habit number 6, which is synergy. Taking what we've learned from adopting the win-win mentality and seeking to understand people, we then create this 6th habit of synergy. And synergy is essentially bringing things together so that the whole is greater than the sum of the parts. Steven outlines in the book that when you place 2 planks of wood together, they're able to hold more weight than if you pile the weight on top of them separately. And when you understand this concept, this is huge for growing yourself and growing your life. Because when we try and do things all by ourselves, when we try and use just the first 3 habits, then there's only so far that we can get. It's through other people and our relationships and connection with others that we really start to grow and develop and experience some profound and meaningful changes in our life. And what synergy is all about is creating this change with other people. It's all about building great families, great friendship groups, great work teams, so that you can enjoy success, you can enjoy joy, and you can enjoy love. All our relationships in our life bring us slightly different things and fulfill us in a slightly different way. But if you want to embrace these things and enjoy these rewards, then synergy is where you really amplify and elevate what you get from your relationships. And that's habit number 6. Now you might have noticed there, the habits are split into 2 halves. There's personal effectiveness and interpersonal effectiveness. 3 habits for each. But the book's called The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. That's because there is one last habit that encompasses everything. And this 7th habit is called sharpen the saw. And this is the most important habit of all. As if you don't embrace this habit, you could read this entire book and learn nothing. You could read this entire book and not grow. You could read this entire book and just keep on living your life the same way that it's always been. Because what sharpen the saw is all about, it's all about consistency. It's discipline. It's rehearsing things. It's going over things again. It's ingraining the habits, doing the consistent practice. This is all about the quadrant 2 activities that we talked about in habit 3. This is doing the things that are really important on a consistent basis. And that is why I've read this book 3 times. It's to sharpen the saw. Because I've read this once and taken certain things from it and applied certain things in my life, but I am not living the 7 habits to their fullest, most complete level. I wasn't after I read it the 2nd time. I wasn't after I read it the 3rd time. The reason why I've kept on rereading this book is to sharpen the saw. The reason why I keep on reading personal development books in general, the reason why I keep on doing these videos, the reason why I meditate every morning is for this 7th habit. It's sharpening the saw. It's developing the consistency and discipline to keep on moving towards your vision, moving towards that end that you have in mind, doing the tasks on a daily, weekly, monthly, and yearly basis to get to where you want to be the person who you want to be, and do the things you want to do in your life. And if you don't embrace that 7th habit, if you keep on reading the self-help books and then just throwing them back on the bookshelf and not implementing this stuff, not creating a deliberate and consistent practice for yourself, then you're never going to be a highly effective person. So that's what the 7th habit is all about, is bringing all these things together and doing them on a consistent basis. So folks, that's a brief overview of the 7 habits of highly effective people. As I say, I highly recommend this book. It's the first book that I suggest people read when they're starting on a journey of change, growth, development, because it's just got so much in it that affects and improves so many different domains of your life that there really is something in here for everyone. And that is something that can be said about very few books, and certainly very few books in the self-help industry. So guys, if you haven't already, get the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. If you have and you haven't read it, what are you waiting for? Get it read. And if you have read it, and maybe it's been a little while since you've read it, I might suggest that you go back and give this another reread and have your pen and paper next to you as you do so. Take some notes and really notice and be honest with yourself. How am I implementing these 7 habits? Am I doing them as effectively as I possibly can? Because folks, when we start to embrace some of the principles that Steven Covey talks about, when we learn how to be personally effective, when we learn how to be interpersonally effective, and when we have this deliberate, consistent practice to be better, that is when you can author your life. Ladies and gentlemen, it's been an honor to share this video with you today. I hope you've enjoyed it. I look forward to speaking to you more in the future. But until then, go out there, elevate your consciousness, pursue your calling, deepen your connection. I'll speak to you soon. David. Hey guys, it's David again. Thank you for watching this video. And if you'd like to take your growth a little further, I have 3 things down below that you can click. First of all is that big red subscribe button to make sure that you stay up to date with all the videos on this channel and you don't miss a thing. Number 2 is a free online course that I have on creating powerful change in your life. Totally free, no sign-ups, just click the link in the video description. Thirdly and finally, I would like to invite you into our Author Your Life community. This is a free Facebook group where like-minded individuals like yourself come together to change their stories and help change the stories of other people. I would love to welcome you into this community to help you continue on your personal journey and help you become the hero of your story. Guys, thank you very much for joining me today. I hope to be able to speak more to you in the future. Now go out there and author your life.